Okay, look, everybody needs to calm down about this October 20th deadline for naturalization, that everything changed with the naturalization process on October 20th. Don't worry about it. Okay, look, I went through this in 2008 when they changed the test the last time. Everybody was all worried and all upset. Oh, it's going to be so much harder now, and I missed the deadline, and I should have filed earlier. Don't worry about it. Look, what did they change? There's a couple important things that they changed, but the actual taking of the test, I don't think is going to make that big of a difference. I'll tell you why. Previously, and this is for everybody who filed before October 20th, 2025, you had to take, you had 100 questions that USCIS had up on their website. And in fact, I have, if you subscribe to me, you already know that I've been doing those naturalization quizzes. I do one a week. So anyway, but you can find that on uscis.gov. There were 100 questions. Now there's going to be 127 questions. 7 more. We don't know what they are yet. At least I don't. One of the big changes is before you would get 10 questions and you had to get 6 correct. Now you're going to get 20 questions. You're going to have to get 12 correct. So they've doubled how many questions you need to know. But this is why I say don't worry about it. Because you have to study all of them anyway. You have to know all 100 anyway. I mean, most of the people, this is what I would always do with clients. About a week or two before they were going to have their interview, I'd call them in, make sure that they had any documents that they needed. Make sure that if things had changed on the form, I was aware of that. Maybe they had a new child, maybe they moved. Just check everything that needed to be checked for the application itself. And then I would give them a quiz. I would give them a test. Because what I always used to do is that anytime I went to a naturalization interview, as they were, it used to be always that they were oral, at least in Philadelphia. They were always verbal, so I could hear the questions. Then they had to do them on a screen a little bit, but for the most part, I heard what the questions were. And I would sit down, I'd have my little pen like in my lap. I always sit behind the client anyway, and I would just write those questions down. And I only had one person give me a hard time about it. It was a female, and she said, "You can't do that. You can't do that." And I said, "Well," I said, "Look, they walk out of here. They have no recollection of any of the questions." And so I always ask them, what was the hardest question, or you did really well on the questions. Which one did you think were easy? And they never remember. They're a total blank. So I just write down the questions. She says, "Well, you're not allowed to do that." "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again." Which had happened every time I went to the interview. I just sat there behind him, writing it down. I hope I could read my own handwriting because I wasn't looking at what I was doing. But I nonchalantly would write down the questions. Then I would come back to the office a day or two later, made sure I didn't miss this, and I started to make a list of, this was a question that was actually asked at the interview. And sometimes, I'd have to I already had that question on the list, so I'd say it was asked 2 times. This was the 3rd time it's been asked, 4th time. So then when the clients are coming in, we're prepping for this interview, I sit down and give them the test. Can they answer these questions? And I didn't give them just 10. We're sitting there talking for 20 minutes, right? So he's getting 15 questions, 20 questions, 25 questions. I know whether he knows this stuff or he doesn't. And that's how my clients always pass those tests. Not because I gave them the questions that they were going to have, because I didn't know which test they were going to have. They had multiple tests. But because I would have some people come in quite confident that they were, I'd say to them, how you doing? I would sit down, we chit chat, how you doing? How you doing? You ready for this test? Oh yeah, I've got this. Oh yeah, no problem. I'm like, good, because I'm going to give you a quiz. Sit down, you got a piece of here. Let me give you a paper and pencil. I'm going to give you a quiz. And they like blanch. And it's like, oh shit, okay. Some of them super confident and for good reason. They knew all the answers. But most of the really confident ones, they didn't know diddly squat. They got caught up on sometimes a whole bunch, sometimes just a few. But even still, if you get a question that you don't know, it sends, fear throughout your body. And they would go back and check. I remember this one guy, I forget what his name was, can't remember his name, but he was one of my favorites, one of my favorite guys. Always very funny and convivial. And anyway, he didn't know diddly squat, nothing, zero. I'm like, oh my God. And he was like, well, I guess I have to do some studying. I'm like, yeah, I guess you do, because your test is next week. Guess what? He came into that test, knew every single question. Not just the ones I had given him. He went back through that book that he had, or I don't know if he had a book or if he had printed out. A lot of times, what I would do is I would print the whole thing out for clients. That's on uscis.gov. He knew every single question. We're sitting there before the interview, and I'm quizzing him. He knew every single one. So you're going to have to answer 20 questions instead of 10. You have to get 12 right instead of 6. It seems like, oh my God, that's double. But you're going to know them anyway. Because you don't know which ones are going to, which ones you're going to get. So you have to know them all anyway. A couple of the other changes. Now, there are some other changes, and they're a little bit more serious. One of them is good moral character. Good moral character was always the absence of bad moral character. As long as you didn't have any arrests, convictions, you were paying your taxes, you paid your child support, and you had proof that you were paying child support, it's no big deal. But now apparently they're looking at, basically, what have you done for us lately? What do you do? How do you help out with the community? And I was just telling my eldest about this in the car today, and she's like, most U.S. citizens don't do any volunteer work. I mean, why should they have to do any volunteer work? It's Trump. It's just him trying to make it a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder. But if you go to church, that should be a plus. If you do some volunteer work, that should be a plus. Maybe you coach a little league team. I have a client of mine who has been a member of AA for decades and has helped many, many, many men get sober. That would be a big plus for him. Also, what kind of ties you have here? How long have you been married? How long have you worked at the place where you're working right now? How many children do you have? Basically, what are your assets? Why is it a good thing that the United States should have you as a new U.S. citizen? The other thing that a lot of people are worried about is that supposedly they're going to be going knocking at people's neighbors' doors. They do this for marriage cases that they think are bad. That when the adjudicator thinks this is a messy marriage, this is not real, they'll send an investigator out to knock on doors. It's to be seen how much they're going to do this with naturalization. I don't know. What a freaking waste of time and waste of money and resources. And it's ridiculous. Now, if somebody's got some issues or problems or something, but if an adjudicator, there's something out there that the adjudicator doesn't like, maybe, but it's not going to be a run of the mill thing. I would be shocked. They don't have the manpower to do this. It's, it's like trying to deport all these people. They don't have the judges. They don't have the trial attorneys. They don't have the time, the energy, the money, the resources to deport everybody that they want to deport. So, I mean, that's why Obama, who was known as deporter in chief, by the way, that's why he became, um, his focus was strictly on the people who had problems with the criminal end of things. If you had any brush with the law, and I mean any, retail theft, you stole a shirt that was worth $25 from Kmart, I'm telling you, you had a problem. He'd leave everybody else alone. All the people who were just trying to make a little living for themselves here, send some money back home. Those folks he would leave alone. He'd focus in on anybody who had any problem with the police. You have to, it's like it falls under the choose your battles category. You can't just round everybody up and deport their asses. You can't do that. So, I don't know. I'm just going to leave it alone from there, because if not, I'm going to start talking about Stephen Miller and Project 2025. I won't be on here for the next 35 minutes. But anyway, I just wanted to tell everybody, don't worry about it too much. If you missed the deadline, you missed the deadline. So now you're going to have 20 questions instead of 10. Trust me, within a year when you're going to have your interview, you're going to pass it. They're probably not going to come knocking at your door. It might be worth your while to put your little thinking cap on and see what you could possibly say as to why you're an asset to the country. It wouldn't hurt to do some, like if you already go to church, do some volunteer work at the church. That wouldn't hurt. I don't know how necessary it's going to be. We're going to see. That's going to play out next year in 2026. We're going to see how seriously they take that. Believe me, there's going to be a lot of old school people who've been doing this for many, many years. They don't care. They're not going to care. They're trying to get these cases off their desk. Let's go, let's go, let's go. If they have to hang around because, you're going to get a letter from the food bank where, every 3 weeks you help one day, then that file stays on their desk, and they don't like that. They want the files off their desks. So we'll see how seriously they take it, but just keep it in the back of your mind if you have an opportunity to do something. Look, Christmas is coming up. We're in the beginning of November right now. Christmas is coming. Sooner or later, they're going to ask you to do something. Help out with the little kids. If you don't go to church, I don't know what you could do. If you have kids in school, do you have kids in school? See if you can volunteer at the school. With be a lunch lady or something, or be on the PTA committee or something. Maybe you love animals. Go see if you can volunteer for an hour every other Saturday at the local SPCA. Wouldn't hurt anyway. You'd probably enjoy it. Anyway, I'm just here to say, don't worry about it too much. It's not going to kill you. You're going to be just fine. As long as you know your questions that they're asking on uscis.gov, you're going to pass the test. It doesn't matter. They can ask you 50 questions, and you'll still pass the test. Right? And make sure you know how to I'm sure you know how to read. Make sure you know how to write. We'll see how they change that. They might change that. They're talking about, they're going to let us know. They're going to be letting us know in the future other changes that may be occurring. As soon as they do, I'll let you know. But meanwhile, don't sweat it. If you haven't filed your naturalization application yet, do it. Get it in, because the sooner you get it in, then the sooner you can get approved. Once you're approved and you get sworn in, doesn't matter if you pass the test, you have to be sworn in as a U.S. citizen. Boom, you can then apply for a ballot and you can vote in the next election. We got a big, big, big important election coming up in 2026. So get that in as soon as you can. And that's it. That's what I have to say. Have a good evening. Have a good afternoon. And thanks for showing up and listening to me. I appreciate it. Leave me a comment. Hit like. Share this if this is helpful to anybody. Share it. And hit subscribe if you want to hear from me. That way you don't miss any of the content. Fascinating as it is. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. In fact, I am going to do another video probably next week about why I'm different than all these other attorneys that you see on YouTube. Doesn't mean I'm better, but I am different. And if you've been watching me, then you probably know why I'm different. But anyway, I wanted to share that with people to let you know that I'm not out for your money. But we'll talk about it later. Thanks. Have a good evening. Bye. Ugh.